Good morning. It is 11:29 a.m. on Sunday, June 4th, 2017. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. Slept in because I stayed up late last night. Um, but today, although I have other things that I could talk about, but today is Sunday. That means it's time to continue the rewatch of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we're starting a new season, Book 3, Fire, Episode 1, The Awakening. So, a lot of stuff going on in this episode. Obviously, with the start of a new season, we have to establish what's the new situation. Last we left our heroes, they were not in good shape. Things were not going well. So we start with Aang waking up and discovering, uh-oh, he's on a Fire Nation ship. This can't be a good thing. So he starts immediately trying to escape, even though we see that he is very clearly injured, and as a great tool for indicating to us how much time has gone by, he's grown hair. It's funny because we always see him with the shaved head, and it was not necessarily... I think actually there was one previous episode where they established specifically that he does shave his head. He's not just naturally bald. But nonetheless, the fact that he's got hair now is a great visual tool for showing us how long it's been immediately. And nonetheless, he's still very weak and in pain. It's fun that we get just the teeniest hint, even before Aang figures it out, that all is not as it appears on this Fire Nation ship, because you could potentially recognize the voice and profiles of the Duke and Pipsqueak in those Fire Nation uniforms. And it's great to see them, too, because they were, of course, the missing members of Jet's squad when we ran into Jet and Longshot and Smellerbee in Ba Sing Se. We couldn't help but wonder, what happened to the Duke and Pipsqueak? Well, apparently they're here. And so it's good to see them again. And then, of course, Aang emerges onto the deck of the ship, discovers, oh, look, there's Katara and Sokka wearing a Fire Nation uniform and all sort of other Fire Nation soldiers who don't seem to be hostile. What is going on? And, of course, the answer is, well, he's been unconscious for weeks. And part of the way they all escaped was they captured a Fire Nation ship and have been using it as disguise. And what's more, they reunited with Hakoda, the father of Katara and Sokka. And it's interesting there. There's an interesting dynamic. Oh, excuse me. Because, so our first instinct would be to say that that is an unambiguously good thing for Katara and Sokka. And yet part of what we discover over the next little bit with Aang's side of the story is that Katara seems to be holding some sort of an animosity towards her father, but then when questioned on it, she seems to be confused, like she's not even realizing she's doing it. Or at the very least, as we discover, she can't come up with a rational explanation for why she would be feeling that way and doesn't want to be feeling that way, and so she's kind of in denial about it. Which is a nicely complex emotional state to have in what could sometimes be described as a kids show, right? So let's continue to just follow Aang and Katara and Sokka's whole path here. Aang kind of gets the update on what's been happening so far. They're currently sailing through. They went back through the Serpent's Pass. We learned that the Earth King has decided to just dress up, I guess, as a Fire Nation individual and just walk the Earth with his bear. All right, sure. It's actually kind of exciting for him, just given that, we learned about him that he had never even been outside the palace, much less his own city. And so it is kind of exciting, the idea that he has this whole world to explore. But yeah, he's also kind of going out into a dangerous world, not knowing anything about it, with a lifetime's worth of habits of being catered to for his every whim. So, yeah, well, good luck. But then what we also discover, much to Aang's dismay, is that everybody in the world thinks the Avatar is dead. And certainly from a tactical perspective, as Sokka points out, that is much to their benefit because it means they have kind of a secret weapon. And the Fire Nation is not continuing to hunt for them in an aggressive way, so they can perhaps do a smaller invasion and still get some damage done during the crucial day of the eclipse, even if they're not going to be able to organize the entire Earth Kingdom's army anymore. So, but the problem, of course, that the others don't seem to fully comprehend, which is both personal for Aang and also a larger impact of this idea, is that if people think the Avatar is dead, that means they think the Avatar has failed again. Because we remember that the whole thing was the previous Avatar had been out and about, a force in the world, and then disappeared for 100 years. And nobody knew what happened. And this whole war happened during all that time. And so that feels like the Avatar kind of let them down. And we know why that actually was, or at least we still don't know what happened to Roku exactly, but we certainly know why there was such a large gap. My little dog is snoring. We know why there was such a large gap, but then Aang started coming out and about and doing things again, and was a force in the world again, and people were aware, and they had hope that the Avatar had returned. And for that matter, we actually hear the family that the kids brought through the Serpent's Pass, the mother and father and their new baby Hope. I mean, people had hope that, well, maybe if the Avatar has returned, then we have hope for this actual war. But now everybody will think, oh, no, sorry, that didn't work. He's dead. So both from a personal standpoint of not wanting people to know that he failed, but also the fear of what people thinking the Avatar is dead will do to the world, Aang is pretty upset. But during a healing session where Katara continues using her healing abilities to try to slowly heal this wound, Aang kind of has flashbacks and realizes and confirms what we kind of was only really hinted at before, which was that, like, he wasn't just hurt; he was dead. He had gone. And she brought him back with that spirit water, and we can't help but feel like it seems like, I wonder if there's another shoe to drop there. Maybe. But to be sure, although he is very frustrated at having failed, he is still thankful to Katara for saving him. But he's still struggling, right? We know that the key moment of him finally releasing attachment and turning into the Avatar state, only to be killed by lightning, resulting in the failure of everything he had been fighting for. You know, you don't get over that easy, even if there is a new plan. And so we have the bit where his friends are reaching out. They're trying to get him involved so he doesn't just keep being depressed in his room on the ship. They're trying. They're being patient, but they're not able to reach him. And so sure enough, he actually decides to run away. He comes to the conclusion, well, obviously all this means is that I have to do it all alone. And I think that we as viewers can all empathize with Katara's frustration and anger with that reaction, which is to say, whoa, what are you talking about? First of all, how is that the conclusion that you came to from what happened? But also just, they kind of feeling, left behind again, which taps into and lets Katara finally access the things that were making her feel angry with her father, which is this idea of, like, I really do understand that you had to go to war and that it was important, but I can't stop feeling left behind and hurt by that, and that makes me angry. And so she's, by feeling that and trying to express it about Aang, to her father, he's able to recognize that that's kind of what's been going on with her too, and they have somewhat of a reconciliation, which is really nice, even though kind of the reconciliation is over. Sometimes it's hard to not feel these things because they're real emotions, even though like you wish you could just feel what you wanted to feel, but it's not that easy. And he kind of tries to excuse Aang, that like Aang's trying to be brave, but Katara is just frustrated. Is like, well, but it's not brave. It's stupid and selfish. And she's right. And we're kind of, cutting back and forth with Aang actually trying to make his way across these stormy seas and past the Fire Nation blockade all on his own. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. He can't survive in the storm. And we watch him have this slow motion reveal that, like, this is not going to work. How he's not going to survive this storm, and the idea that like, oh, I have to go do this on my own, I have to run away, but like what we see demonstrated pretty thoroughly is like he could have just died for real this time, for good, because he just chose to run away instead of letting his friends help him. And it's a hard thing, and ultimately he might have very well drowned in that ocean, despite doing the best he could to, water windboard with his glider in the driftwood after he stopped being able to completely fly. And but then even that's not going to work, and so finally, at long last, he's feeling like his failure is utter. He sees the vision of Avatar Roku, who basically is telling him, it's like, this is not all on you. I made mistakes too, because of course we know that Roku was the Avatar that was around when the war started, that time frame, and for he's basically saying, I should have known, I should have seen that it was coming and done something. And we don't know all the details there, but it's presented in a way that suggests to us that we're going to get a little bit more of a flashback of that, maybe. But he's basically just giving Aang permission that it's like, you don't, everyone makes mistakes, even the Avatar. But you can't let your shame about those mistakes stop you from continuing to try to do anything you can. And then we see a vision of Princess Yue, who we last saw as she became the spiritual embodiment of the moon. And she calms the seas. And it's beautiful. And she encourages him too. And it's a wonderful moment. And it's kind of interesting to recall really how little of the whole series that Princess Yue was in. And yet, like, that was just such a successful little mini arc of storytelling, all the stuff with her. And so eventually, feeling a little bit re-encouraged, and with the assistance of his sort of spiritual friends here, he's able to make it to this little island here, and he ends up arriving back at Crescent Island, where that one fire's temple that he had once been there, and now it's a ruin because of the volcano that got unleashed there. And he is, and then we have him wake up there on the shoreline, and who arrives but Katara and Sokka and Toph on with Momo and Appa, and they come to him and they say, what are you doing, buddy? We're not letting you go anywhere without us. We'll reunite with the fleet when it's time for the invasion. But for now, we're with you. Let us be with you. And he's finally willing to accept their help, even though it's still a bittersweet moment, because this is where he's recognizing that they are right in that the need for him to pretend he's not the Avatar is important right now, which is he's still feeling shame about it, but at the very least we can see now that by choosing a more productive path, a more constructive path, they can perhaps build to something else instead of him just running off by himself and getting killed. However, both by covering up his arrow with a bandana, we get another really strong symbolic moment of this decision that he still feels very ambivalent about. The glider is too distinctive, and it's half broken anyway. So he burns it. That's kind of that's an uncomfortable moment. But we'll see. They've got a plan. Sokka's plan, as Katara insisted. But yeah, so that's where we leave the Team Avatar. But in the meantime, cut in between all of that, we have Zuko, now returning home for the first time in 3 years. We first see him there on the ship on the way there, already having second thoughts and being unsure what he's really just done, and having betrayed Iroh and not being sure that he did the right thing here, because he made a choice based on this idea that he wants his honor back. But I think what he's struggling with is that what he did that was supposedly to restore his honor doesn't feel honorable. And that's where he's kind of struggling. And we get some nice stuff with Mai, who basically comes and tries to reassure him to not worry so much about it, and then kisses him to calm him down. And it's an interesting kind of bit, because certainly her, the only time Mai's apathy ever kind of subsides, it seems to be when she is showing affection for Zuko. And yet, we can imagine that not ending well for a variety of reasons. First, Zuko's kind of a mess. I'm not sure he's really mentally or emotionally stable enough to sustain any kind of a relationship right now. But also, we could imagine Azula not being very sympathetic to those feelings. Azula doesn't really seem to love anybody. Like, she relies on her friends, but demands loyalty from them. So, who knows how that might go. But to be sure, what we see is, as Azula promised, Zuko is welcomed home. And we hear the story of the fall of Ba Sing Se and the fall of the Earth Kingdom, and of course, from their perspective, the death of the Avatar. And both Azula and Zuko are proclaimed as heroes. And we get the return of those two old ladies that followed Azula around when she was first introduced. Lo and Li, I believe, is what their names are in this wiki that I found, even though I don't recall if we've been given their names in the series thus far. But nonetheless, so Zuko returns home, and it seems to be as promised that he's being hailed as a hero. We see him back in Fire Nation clothing for the first time in a while. But he hasn't seen his father yet. And he's still not convinced that that's all going to work out. The last time he saw his father was a very painful memory, both emotionally and physically. And so he's worried about that. And we get a nice moment where they don't beat us over the head with the idea that he's sitting by this pond feeding the turtle ducks, and we remember that that's something he used to do with his mom, that we saw as a flashback in the episode last season where Zuko alone. And we see him trying to be nice to these little turtle ducks and feed them, but then we see them swim away in fear as Azula approaches, and we remember that whole moment back then was Zuko throwing a rock at them because that's what Azula does, and being, scolded from his mom about that, and having that be one of his first real awarenesses that Azula is not a good figure to emulate, and that he maybe really cares more about what his mom might think than what Azula might think. But so to have that moment echoed without them needing to remind us about the flashback is kind of a nicely, elegantly told little story moment there. But of course, Azula is basically trying to reassure him that the Fire Lord, of course, is going to welcome you home. Why wouldn't he? But she's also, because it's Azula, she's gonna, she is herself. And what we get a little bit is a little bit of a discussion of, well, of course the Avatar is dead and couldn't possibly come back, right? And we see Zuko remember that special spirit healing water, and perhaps wondering, could that have brought him back? Because we know that Katara escaped with Aang's body, so it's one thing to say we're sure he's dead, but he got away, and he's now with his friends who have apparently magical healing spirit water. He doesn't tell Azula that, kind of notably, which again is just this in further hinting that like he's conflicted about what happened here. But Azula, because she is super sharp, spots his hesitation. And again, she's such a great villain. Oh my god, I love her character as a villain. Obviously, not as a person. But so when Zuko finally does go to see his father, we actually see Fire Lord Ozai's face for the first time. And I don't know, he looks kind of surprisingly young, I think. Perhaps maybe just in comparison to Iroh. But we see him, and he does welcome Zuko home. But we quickly realize he's specifically welcoming Zuko home because you killed the Avatar. And Zuko is immediately in a position of saying, what version of the story did you hear? And so Azula apparently told him. And it's interesting, and further deepens Zuko's conflict, because he thought he wanted nothing more than for his father to be happy with him again, but now he's discovering, oh yeah, my father's happy with me because he thinks I did something that I actually didn't do. So that's uncomfortable. And what's worse is that he knows Azula too well to think that she would ever give him credit for free. Like, there's got to be something else to it. He's not sure he wants the credit, but especially since he doesn't want the credit when he didn't actually do it. And he's not sure that maybe he would have done it. But she did, and she gave him the credit. Why? Right? And so, of course, what we discover is that she's basically saw his hesitation that the Avatar might be permanently dead, and just basically wanted to say, look, Zuko's job was to kill the Avatar, and if the Avatar turns out not to be actually dead, Zuko's the one that'll be embarrassed. And, so, poor Zuko. He got everything he wanted, and it's all terrible. That's where we leave our characters as we start season 3. But we've still got a plan moving forward. The Team Avatar has got to get Aang back on his feet, healed, continue to explore spiritually what he can do to help this invasion that's going to happen on the eclipse. Meanwhile, Zuko is in this uncomfortable position of basically being told, good job, you won, and it really not feeling like he did a good job or that he won. So, next Sunday, we'll begin Season 3, Episode 2. And in the meantime, I will talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.